Hello and welcome to the first event of the Freestyle Wellness Festival, our positivity panel. I'm Louise Deeley and I'm a sport and exercise psychologist, and I've worked in the field of performance and well-being for over 25 years. I'm really excited to be here today because for me, positivity runs through everything that we do, regardless of who we are, what we have, the lifestyle that we lead. And I strongly believe that by adopting some of the ideas, experiences and tips that our panelists will share with us today, we can improve all of our lives and it will help us all. Now, unfortunately, Dr. Jen Bateman couldn't be here today as advertised, which is a shame for all of us. However, we do have some fantastic people that we're going to talk to in a moment. But first, Abbott asked 3 FreeStyle Libre ambassadors to tell us how they take a positive approach to their lives. So let's have a little look.
Hi everyone, hope you're all well.
Hi guys, I'm Mohammed Ali.
Good morning, it's Wednesday, it's lunchtime, and I'm just out getting my steps up. Today has not been a good day on the diabetic front. Missed my morning run. It's after putting everything into a bit of a kilter, so I'm playing catch up. So I'm trying to work off a bit of the energy that I would have necessarily burnt off in the morning usually.
I'm just waiting in my car whilst it defrosts because it's so cold outside, and I think sometimes when it's raining or it's snowing, it's icy, it can really, affect our motivation. This is what I do every single day. I try and create and give myself what I call like a non-negotiable. No matter how much we don't want to do it, we're going to do it. So the best way to think about it is, as someone living with diabetes, having my insulin, it's annoying, it hurts sometimes, but it's a non-negotiable. I will always have it. Same with getting up in the morning and brushing our teeth. Like, no matter how late we are for work, we will always brush our teeth because it's a non-negotiable. It could be getting 10,000 steps in, it could be doing a workout, it could be eating 5 portions of vegetables. Just 1 or 2 non-negotiables each day, and that helps to change your mindset.
I keep positive by staying physically active and beating my times and numbers. For example, tomorrow's my strength conditioning day. I'll be looking to lift heavier weights than last week or the same amount, and then in 3 to 4 weeks time beating my last personal record.
Some of the best input I've been ever given is about being honest with yourself. You can put on a facade in the short term, but it only I suppose it's only going to affect you in the long term. And that's been something I've been really I've embraced last year. I became a father for the first time, put it all in perspective for me and saying, okay, I've got to be the best I can be. How do I do it? Let's keep the steps going. I hope everyone's having a nice day. Cheers.
Just wanted to jump on here and talk about my type 1 diabetes and how I stay so positive. First of all, as we all know, it's very hard sometimes. It can be very, very overwhelming. When I was a teenager, I was very demotivated, I was very overwhelmed, and I just kind of tried to forget about my diabetes. So what I found was that when I started to talk to others who also live with type 1 diabetes, it had such a positive effect on my own motivation to, keep a close eye on my glucose levels, to make healthy choices, and to keep reminding myself that, bad days are going to happen. High glucose levels are going to come and go. It's just kind of part and parcel. At the end of the day, we're doing the job of an organ, so it is tough, but we've just got to remain positive and just keep going. So yeah, my main piece of advice for anyone living with type 1 diabetes, whether you're having a good day, a good week, a bad week, just talk to other people with diabetes and reach out and share experiences, because not only may it help you, but it may also help someone else as well.
I always try keeping positive always try flushing the negativity out of my body. So it's very important for me to speak to family members, or if family members can't help me, I'll speak to a friend or seek help from professionals. I don't shy away from seeking help if I think they can support me.
Good morning. It's Friday morning. It's just after sunrise. You can see it over here. And I'm on the top of Arthur's Seat in Edinburgh, Scotland. It's cold. It's minus 2.5 degrees. I'm freezing. You know, it's funny, you're coming out on a run like this. I'm 7 kilometers in of a 16k run. And before I thought this was kind of ultimately possible because number one, my blood sugars weren't always as good as they are now. But it's made possible by, I suppose, me embracing technology. And here today I've got my phone and my insulin pump and my FreeStyle Libre too. And with a simple scan I'm able to check what I am. Now I've just come from the top. I was 6.5 and I'm a good few kilometers away from home yet, but let's see how consistent I can make it all the way home. You know, when asked to do this, I was asked what motivates me, and it's the challenge. It's the challenge of being able to be the best I can be. I'm only one of 4 people up here this morning. I don't know if it's a sign of madness or if I'm able to push myself. Look, I'll cut off here, but yeah, I'm loving the challenge, and certainly with technology, it's allowing me to accept it and face it head on. And that challenge for me is type 1 diabetes. Okay, you got the view. Cheers.
So that was a great start to the session, and I'm delighted to say we've got 2 of the stars of those videos here. So I'd like to ask them to introduce themselves, and if we could go to you, Vanessa, first, please.
Oh, thank you, and thank you for having me on. It's an absolute pleasure. My name is Vanessa, also known as the Diabetic Health Coach. I am a personal trainer, online health and fitness coach, and board certified behaviour analyst. So yeah, I work with a number of people to help them to meet their health and fitness related goals. And being a type 1 myself, it's always nice to be able to speak and liaise with other people living with type 1 diabetes and to help them to meet their goals.
Thanks for that. And Owen.
Thank you very much, Louise. I'm delighted to be here today. My name is Owen Quinn. I'm from Waterford, Ireland. I've been a type 1 diabetic since the age of 4 years of age. I'm pretty excited about being here today. You know, it's the idea of the positivity panel is one that I suppose struck my interest purely for the fact that, you know, diabetes is a challenge and it's not an easy one. And finding every element of positivity as you can in the day is a really, really important factor in overcoming it.
Yes, thanks guys for that. I think that's right. And I think it probably lends us to thinking about starting the session with the whole idea of positive mental attitude and what that actually means to us. And, you know, for me, I think positive mental attitude is that ability to be able to step back and recognize the challenges are always going to be there. And I guess especially, you know, with diabetes, but it's also about recognizing that, thinking what can we control and what can we not control. So it's that old adage of controlling the controllable. So, you know, I wonder, Vanessa, you know, for you, what does positive attitude mean to you, and how would you describe it?
I mean, in terms of positive attitude, I think it's, you know, especially for us living with type 1 diabetes, it's very easy for us to think about maybe like what's not gone so well, and it's all about trying to change our mindset so that we're focusing a little bit more on the positive. So rather than thinking, oh, well, what's not gone so well today, it's trying to flip that over to think about, well, what has gone well today. So even though my glucose levels have run a little bit higher, you know, what have I done well, what's gone right? And I think it's trying to train ourselves to think about the positives first as opposed to the negatives. So yeah, it's not, for me, it's all about trying to focus on what has gone well and what I've managed to control, each day.
Yeah, no, I mean, and that sounds great. I mean, and you've already in there, you're giving us some positive examples of how you're utilizing that within your own life. I mean, Owen, for you, how would you describe it?
Yeah, look, I suppose diabetes is one of those challenges that you don't really understand it until you have it. And the idea of finding positivity in your day, it's something that doesn't leave you. It's something that you're faced with every single day. And the days that aren't going so well, the challenge of trying to pick yourself back up and trying to reset. And you can't reset yourself the next day. You got to reset yourself the minute something bad happens or something that an obstacle comes in your way. So finding the motivation, and being a driver of that is a really tough task. And I suppose if someone was to know about motivation and positivity, it's a type 1 diabetic, because you're trying to reinvent yourself to overcome the barriers that face you. And for me personally, that's something that I suppose I've embraced, and maybe I've actually come to get too used to it over the time. I applying that concept and that approach into other aspects of my life. It's managed for me to become a better person in the work environment, a better person in my social environment. So it's spinning it on its head. It's the ability to overcome the challenges, no matter how small or big they are, and turn it into the positive.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I mean, watching the film earlier, especially and thinking about your running, I mean, when we think about the links between, the mental and physical aspects of wellness, and for me, it's massive, working in sport, but also as a long-term exerciser and watching what you guys were doing. I mean, how do you think that link between the mental and physical impacts on us, and how they interact both ways, are impacted more with diabetes? So, Vanessa, maybe you could put some input in on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in terms of type 1 diabetes, there's a lot of, physical impacts on the body, and sometimes that can kind of run over into our mindset as well. So, for example, just using like my own example, it's kind of when I was younger, I used to get I never used to like like lumps on my legs or on my arms from where I used to do my injections. I used to be a little bit conscious of that. And, it kind of like knocked my confidence a little bit. And then what I've kind of learned over the years is to accept that, and to accept, what, there's going to be little bruises here and there. But that's, it just shows what I do on a daily basis and what I have to put up with, and just how strong I am. And in terms of, I mean, myself, I'm a personal trainer, and I do a lot of training, a lot of sport. And one thing that I focus on is, because I know that sometimes with having, for example, like low glucose levels, high glucose levels, sometimes it can impact activity. I kind of use it. I try and switch it round and use it so that I aim for it not to stop me achieving those physical goals as well. Because I think for a lot of us with type 1 diabetes, we always think about things that we can't do, as opposed to the things that we can do and we still can do. Sport and exercise being one of them. So yeah, I think that, it's really important to focus on, even though we may feel that diabetes stops us, might interfere with certain things, there's ways and means around everything, and it shouldn't stop us, achieving what we want to achieve.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you touched on something in there, I think, that really struck a chord, was focusing on the things that you can do rather than things you can't. And I wonder if you could just sort of elaborate on that for us a little bit, of maybe if you've got an example of where you've turned something around, or a tip that you might be able to give us, in the exercise domain.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for me, I again in terms of when I train, sometimes you may have a goal in place where, let's say, you're wanting to drop body fat, and for those with type 1 diabetes, it can be quite difficult sometimes, because especially, for example, we may go into a session and we're trying to drop body fat, but then we get a low glucose level and then we're having to eat when we're not hungry, and sometimes that can really knock our confidence. We just think, oh, what's the point? There's no point. And I get a lot of clients who think that and think, well, having to eat this and eat this what I wouldn't usually eat, and it's not the best. Obviously, like with in terms of like sweets and biscuits, that kind of thing. So it's trying to kind of overcome that and see past that, and not it's trying to just not let it stop you getting to where you want to be. And I think this is where goal setting comes into place as well. And for me, I've kind of along through the years, I've accepted that, because my type 1 diabetes is a part of me, and there's going to be little bumps along the way, even when it comes to things like fat loss, fitness, that kind of thing. However, it's just learning to control it so that it doesn't become a bump, as much of a bump in the road. Sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think we're going to have bigger bumps and little bumps. And that whole thing of the goal setting and having that outcome at the end that you're giving yourself the why for. Why do you put yourself through these things? Why are we doing this? Why are we focusing on that? And I think that's, really important aspect of achieving things. Owen, for you, the link between the mental and the physical, what would you add to that?
It's massive. The link for me personally. There's a big correlation there. From my personal perspective, exercise makes up a big part of my life. Whether it's a morning run or it's setting out on a challenge that's been planned for a number of months. But there's an element of endorphins that I tend to chase, and with managing diabetes. From a young age all the way up to where I am now, the relationship between exercise and diabetes has been critical. Now, along the way, that's not an easy relationship, because sometimes if you're going out to do those long distance runs or long distance cycling or swimming, it's about understanding and managing your blood sugars in order for you to and enable you to be the best that you can be in doing that exercise. Whether it's preparing beforehand, and also along the way, just as Vanessa mentioned, there's bumps along the way. And I remember remember being very young, running cross country races and being faced with a hypo halfway through. When you're near the finish line and you're coming in first position. And they're kind of, I suppose, ones that will always remain with you, but you overcome that and learn a lot from it. I suppose looking back on it all now, and being able to juggle multiple types of sport in my life, it's really getting the small stuff right. So getting the real important, easy stuff right, and then setting out on your journey from there.
Yes, I mean that's really interesting about the little things and getting the little things right, because they all stack up, don't they? When you're thinking about bringing them together. I mean, it's interesting listening to both of you, because you're both obviously incredibly positive people, and it's interesting that my dad was also a diabetic, and he was a positive person in many ways. But it does raise the question of whether, positivity is something that comes naturally to us, or whether or not we have to work at it consciously. And if we do, how do we do that? I wonder, Vanessa, what's your thoughts on that?
I mean, absolutely. I mean, for a lot of us, it may not come naturally, because I mean, we get a diabetes diagnosis and it's life changing. I mean, this is the side that a lot of people who don't have diabetes, they don't see the constant, thinking about our glucose levels, monitoring, the guesswork, the hard work that we put in each and every day. And it is easy to kind of focus more on the negative. So it is something that we have to, I mean, I've definitely had to teach myself over the years. But yeah, for me, I just try and, like I mentioned before, just try to focus on what has gone right and what has gone well, as opposed to focusing on what hasn't gone so well. And I honestly think that peer support really does help to shape, how we think about our diabetes, and it just helps us to think a little bit, well, it helped me in particular to think a little bit more positive about my own diabetes, because when I was a teenager, I didn't know anyone, and during that time, I thought very negatively towards my diabetes, whereas when I started to chat to others, started to reach out to others, I I began to look at it in a different light. And yeah, that's why I just think for anyone who's living with diabetes, it's really important to reach out to others and communicate and talk.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think you're spot on there. Owen, what do you think about, what comes naturally to you in terms of positivity or not?
Yeah, look, I'd like to consider myself as a positive person, but even the most positive person can be knocked down with type 1 diabetes. It's, as I said earlier, it's really the ability to pick yourself back up. And I from my perspective, and the challenges that I've overcome with type 1 diabetes, and facing those challenges along the way, whether it's a hypo or it's a high blood sugar at the most, the most awkward times, it's the important piece is learning from it and saying, okay, look, this was a bad day, but how am I going to improve on this and take the learning from today and position myself to be better. And look, it's not easy. It certainly isn't easy, and there's no right answer. But when you put yourself into the mentality of being that, having a bit of positivity and setting your goals so you can achieve it, no matter who you are, a goal is so important because it shows you're moving in the right direction. And having that ability to achieve the goal, you overcome the goal, you get it, you know you're on the right track. And yeah, that's certainly something I've had to do as a type 1 diabetic, particularly during my teenage years. It was one where I would turn my back on my diabetes, and it would only come and impact me later down the line, and put everything on the back burner. And it was only until I said, okay, right, look, I have type 1 diabetes. Let's set myself a target. Let's set myself consistent bloods for a week. And then it's about actually, rewarding yourself for that. So they work. I suppose they work in a close relationship with each other.
Yeah, absolutely. And that, you mentioned earlier about going on the endorphin route and seeking those. And I think what this reminds me of is thinking about how we create habits, because a lot of the time we think about creating habits as, eating healthy foods regularly or doing our exercise regularly. But our thinking and our approach to things also become habitual. And if we're regularly reminding ourselves to reframe things and to think about things in a more positive way, that starts to become a habit. When we start to notice that we get rewards for that, we get that little dopamine release, which is our reward pathway in the brain. And it starts to build those, I suppose, neurological networks that create the habits for the way we think and the way we talk to ourselves. Now, both of you have given some really good backgrounds about where you've come from on things. And I just wondered if, and maybe Owen, you might want to address this one first, is whether there was a specific turning point for you in your diabetic journey, as it was, that, really stands out in terms of a turning point. And if so, was there something in there that triggered it, something that made you think, right,
Yeah, there are two examples that I know personally that I can give. One was when I went off to university over in the UK. So I'd grown up with my family in Ireland. I was very, surrounded by family and friends, on a regular basis. And I moved into a new environment, and no one knew who I was. No one knew I was a type 1 diabetic. And it was kind of dawned on me thinking, right, okay, time to step up here. Time to step up here, Quinn. You gotta make sure you've got your ducks in a row. And it was kind of a situation for me to say, right, I've got to be responsible. I've got to be responsible for myself, and take all the learnings that I've done over the years and apply it. Now, I had been very self-sufficient up to that point, but you do have a safety net, and no matter where you are in the world, for me anyway, I've always had a safety net, and then it was taken from me. The next learning point for me as a type 1 diabetic, it was I was doing a challenge where we were cycling from Ireland over to Gaza. It was in 2008, and it was a big undertaking. It was 6,000 kilometers, and we were doing it in 40 days. And for a normal person, it was going to be a challenge to overcome. But having diabetes on top of that, it meant that I had to be forward thinking, and I had to be thinking, okay, well, what's 2 days ahead look like? What does the food supply look like? How do I make sure that I don't let myself down, but also my support team down? And I learned a lot from that, because along the way, it wasn't smooth sailing, but it was how I overcome that and made sure I got back on the bike every single day, knocking out the 160 miles. So it was a difficult task, but we overcame it. And it was a big learning curve for me personally. And I apply that same mentality and approach to my everyday work and also, everyday life.
And Vanessa, what's the one tip that you could give us to help us stay positive that we could use every day?
For me, journaling's quite important, where, each morning writing down 3 things that I'm grateful for. So it can be absolutely anything, something that, I'm grateful for each and every day. And I think for a lot of us, sometimes it's easy to forget about that and to practice gratitude. I know sometimes, for example, we might go to bed and we realise we're coming down with a cold and we can't breathe properly, and then we realise, I took for granted just being able to breathe properly, little things like that. So I think every day, starting the day where it's 3 things that I'm grateful for, and this can be linked to diabetes, it could be linked to, absolutely anything. It can just I think it helps to put things into perspective as well. And like I mentioned previously, just focusing on, what has gone well today. Think, you might have 10 things that have not gone so well, but as long as you're putting more focus on the one thing that has gone well, it again, just practicing that and trying to train our brains to think that way. That's one thing that I've found to really help. And again, even speaking and relaying that information back to someone else, or even just, communicating, whether it's with a family member or another person with type 1 diabetes, about how you're feeling as well, and just talking about feelings. I think that's also really, really important.
And Owen, from your perspective, what's the one thing that you think people should take away that they could do every day?
Yeah, I think Vanessa articulated the answer pretty well, and it's a point that resonates with me, and that's I suppose being able to be honest with yourself and to be able to speak to others. The power of opening up to someone, either in your family or even a complete stranger, about diabetes and the challenges you face has an incredible power, and one that's helped me along the way in times of just pure darkness. And looking at from another person's perspective, even if they don't know what type 1 diabetes is, or the complications, or the challenges that you face. But for me, it's the ability to be transparent with my partner and my family around me, and that's been certainly something that's helped me.
Unfortunately, that's all the time we've got. Vanessa and Owen, thank you again so much for your time, for your fantastic insights, and for your tips on staying positive. We hope you've been inspired by what you've heard, and we know that life with diabetes can be challenging, and there will be some bad days as well as the good ones. But it's really important to remember that they are just days, and you're not alone. and as a community we can support one another and stay positive.